this instead of meetings. So today I decided that y'all got to see the pre-webinar meeting as well by turning it on about 15 minutes early. So that was sort of a fun introduction to this. This is a series that we came up with about 4 or 5 months ago, where we thought it would be fun to see past presentations from the Self-Reliance Festival in Camden, Tennessee, and then be able to discuss them. So those of you who are in the chat, make sure you're talking to everybody in the drop down, but you can chat with each other as we're going and talk back and forth as things strike you. And if you want to ask a question or have a comment be seen for us to handle as we go, if you hover over your window, there's a little Q&A button there. And if you submit a question to that, I see it in a list and we can proctor those as we pop in and out of the video we're going to watch. I wanted to introduce Shawn from Hack My Homestead. That's hackmyhomestead.com. He's joining me today as a co-host. He's also our sponsor and vendor manager and has been very helpful to Self-Reliance Festival since the very first one. You've been to every single one, right, Shawn? Yep, and you're muted, so. Well, Shawn's doing the right thing. He's muting when he's not talking.
That's right.
Okay, so Self-Reliance Festival started as a dream, and it was after a party at Special Operations Equipment when John Willis had spent that whole party showing people his homesteading stuff. And he said, Nicole, people are really interested in this. Like, maybe we should do something. And so I put a call out to his network, to my network, and said, if you want to present anything, fill out this form. And the first Self-Reliance Festival had about 150 people, and we were giving presentations in John's garage, which is also his gym. So there's all this gym equipment everywhere. And then we also had a pole barn outside, and we were rotating back and forth sessions. And we just had a really good time, got done with that and decided one day isn't enough. We're going to do 2 days. And from there, we've exceeded 500 people coming to the festival. I think the best outcomes of the festival have been the relationships people develop as they get to know each other and discover other people are worried about the same things I'm worried about, and other people are interested in some of the same things I'm interested in. And, I would not have my sheep. My flock of sheep would not exist today had the second Self-Reliance Festival not happened. And somebody was talking about needing to sell their sheep as Tactical Redknock was walking the other direction, and he did a U-turn and said, oh, tell me more. And we ended up buying that flock of sheep. And there are stories after stories after stories about stuff like that happens. Right now, tickets are only $50 through the end of August 1st, so midnight on August 1st. And that's because a generous sponsor popped in and said, for every early bird ticket we sell, we'll get $25 off back from them. So they're like subsidizing every early bird ticket. And we also added this time, so this is new, we've added a family pass for $150. It will go up. The price on that will go up after early bird expires too, but that gets 2 adults and any related child, no matter how many you have. A family with 5 children just signed up yesterday for a total of $150. And paired with that, we are working with Rebecca Cook, so Becky Cook, Toolman Tim's wife, who runs daycare centers, to do Self-Reliance Kids during Self-Reliance Festival. So at different times during the festival, there'll be some children's activities, anything from cooking with fire. Don't worry, we have methods where they don't need to burn themselves, to doing more, crafty things like painting or carving pumpkins, stuff of that nature. The whole point there is to give families something that they can take their kids to that will pique interest, so that long-term we have more people coming up in the homesteading and self-reliance movement. So if you're interested in that, the event is October 5th and 6th, and it's in Camden, Tennessee, and the website is selfreliancefestival.com. With that, Shawn, I'm going to hand things to you.
All right. I assume you guys can hear me okay. Yeah, so a couple of things I just wanted to reiterate that Nicole mentioned. The we've been talking a lot online in some of the groups that I'm involved with about how the generation or two that's older than me didn't really instill that homesteading ideals in us. Like there wasn't like maybe you had a grandparent that like you went and visited and they were doing some homesteady type stuff. But you know, when I was coming up through school, it was like go to college, join the military so that they'll pay for your college, and then go to college or go to college. Like those are your options. And as a matter of fact, I remember multiple times being told, you know, essentially, your only options are to go to college or you're going to be flipping burgers somewhere, which is ironic because I actually worked at Waffle House during high school. So I was already flipping burgers and I loved it. It was really fun. But the idea, like Nicole said, is we want young kids to be exposed to some of these things as well as each other. There's a ton of homeschoolers kind of in our community. And so it's always great to get those kids together so that they can share their own experiences, but also to have some exposure to the things that we talk about at Self Reliance Festival. You know, we talk about obviously what do you need to do to be self reliant? It's kind of a misnomer because we talk a lot about community and we talk a lot about finding your tribe and things like that. But it's like, you know, a lot of people say self-reliance, like, oh, I've got to rely on myself for everything. And that's really not what the whole situation is about. It's about the community. It's about, hey, I grow chickens for, you know, for meat and eggs. You've got ducks. Why don't we trade? That way I don't have to grow ducks. Like it's just simple stuff like that. So we definitely want the families to come out. We understand in the past that buying a full price ticket for a 2-year-old kid, you know, is kind of a barrier to entry for some people. So one of the things that we decided to do this year was the family pass. So a couple other things I wanted to cover. Make sure if you've got a question, are we telling everyone to put it in all caps? Nicole, is that right?
That they can do that in the comments. If you put the word question in all caps, I'll see it. So Rosie has already used the question and answer tool. They have a tool at the bottom. It says Q&A, and if you enter the question there, it just collects them for us all in one place.
Okay.
She asked me how the tongue was because I did a live stream today cooking a cow's tongue, and unfortunately, the answer is still cooking. So, but I promise, Rosie, I'll let you know how it was.
Yeah, they're big pieces of meat. It takes a little while.
Yep.
All right, so one of the other things I wanted to talk about, we do a giveaway at every one of these webinars, which again, we started back in the spring. Today's giveaway is actually sponsored by me. We will pick the name today, so you have to be here on the webinar in order to be eligible to be picked, obviously. And then I will physically hand you the thing at Self Reliance in the fall. And the thing is a USB drive with all of my ebooks. And I went on and checked out. If you add all my ebooks together, they're like $123 if you were to buy all of them. And I'll run through real quickly what that is. So my newest one is Mastering Solar Incentives. I do a deep dive on federal solar tax credits that you can get for putting solar and or batteries in at your house. I also have the solar water pumping white paper. So this is based off the Kickstarter movie that we did last year, where we've got all of the pump testing information, how to figure out how to pump with solar, how to figure out what head pressure is and all of these different things. We've got another book called The Backwoods Blueprint. And this is literally the steps that you should go through if you want to buy remote off-grid land for homesteading. Okay, so especially like halfway across the country, or you might not necessarily be able to travel there to look at it, how to get cheap land, that type of thing. I also have a vermicomposting superbook. And so this is like everything you've ever wanted to know about vermicomposting, all packed into 48 pages. And then I've also got another book that's called How to Evaluate Your Home's PV Potential. So if you're interested in putting solar on your house, whether that's to hire a contractor or to DIY, this ebook runs you through all of the like definitions that you need to know, how it all works, and how to actually use your power bill to come up with a budget to compare to the quote that you're getting, or you know, just a place to start where you say, maybe it's out of the cards for me right now. So all of those will be on the thumb drive, as well as about 3 dozen PDFs curated by me that are just all about off-grid living. So whether it's gray water, whether it's black water, whether it's solar, whether it's designing your house to maximize solar gain in the winter and minimize it in the summer, all of those things all together. And like I said, if you're here at the end, you're eligible to get that, and I will deliver it to you in person at SRF in October. Let's see, what else did I have on my list to talk about? All right, so actually, the next thing is actually introducing our video. Go ahead.
I was going to interrupt before you do the video, guys. We are streaming the first half of this webinar to the Living Free in Tennessee YouTube channel right now, and possibly my Facebook, I'm not sure. And if you're watching it there and want to be eligible to win this awesome giveaway, you're going to need to be on the actual webinar to do that. And we're only streaming the first half of the webinar. So if you're interested, be sure to go to selfreliancefestival.com/webinar, hit sign up, and that will trigger an email with the link to the Zoom so that you can join us on the actual webinar and win your chance, or get entered in your chance to win the giveaway. Okay, go for it.
All right, so our segment that we're actually going to be covering today on the webinar was from Billy Bond from Permapastures Farm and the Permaculture Pimpcast. Great permaculturist. This was actually Billy and his son William actually were both together on stage to walk through this. You'll get to see William's fantastic artistry skills. I mean, they're on point. You're not going to believe how awesome they are. But he walks through the chicken tractor on steroids. So they developed this program. It's kind of built on some things that Jeff Lawton, who's kind of like the prince of permaculture, so to speak, he built this off of someone else's idea, and then they took it and just started building and testing and doing different things with it. And so he walks you through that whole system of how it works, what they've done, what they've learned through testing all these different methodologies for the chicken tractor on steroids.
All right. Okay, we're gonna do a little finger cross for Technology Works. I'm gonna switch it over to the video.
This is weird, but joyful. When I say weird, I'm hearing myself on a mic. Right off the bat, before we get into it, I want to give a huge shout out to my friends sitting right there, Two Old Crows Homestead. Give them a hand, y'all. Every time we go to a festival like this, we got two guys and we know absolutely nothing about how to set up a booth, how to do any of that. And the last time, they saved our bacon because we processed a pig and didn't have time to cook it. They did it for us, and today they hooked us up again. So I want to give them a round of applause again. Thanks, y'all. And also I want to give a round of applause to my band, Sexual Chocolate. They play so fine, don't you agree? All right, just breaking the ice a little bit. Hey, good to see all of you people out here today. It's a joy to be here. Thanks, John. Thanks, Nicole. And thanks, everybody else, for having us. Okay, I'm Billy, the permaculture pimp daddy from Permapastures Farm. That used to be my handle. And for those of you that might be offended, PIMP stands for Permaculture is My Passion. So it's an acronym. I basically took a awful word and took something and made positive out of it, okay? And the whole purpose for that was to reach out to the people that might look a little bit like me. So if I can make them laugh, then maybe they might think that this lifestyle is a little bit possible for them. Well, that drifted into anybody that's willing to listen. So that brings us here today. Okay, so we have a farm, Permapastures Farm, about 6 hours that way in Mars Hill, North Carolina. Now, what if I told you there is a way for everybody in this room to raise all of your chickens, all of your eggs. When I say chickens, I mean meat birds, all of your eggs, and produce more compost than you ever thought imaginable for free. Would you believe me? Well, you ought to, because we have long playlists on our YouTube channel showing you how to do it. So we're going to give you the cliff notes today. My son, backup dancer, William, by the way, compost extraordinaire, extraordinaire in so many different things. We're going to give you an overview. And then if you want to see specific ways on how to do that, go and check out the playlist, because it's one thing to sit here and see it on the stage or hear me talk about it. It's another to do it. But at the end of the day, look, none of this means anything if you don't put foot to butt and get it done. In fact, same two people over here, they're one of the people. How many people in this room by the chance have tried the chicken tractor on steroids? I know they have.
We have one. We do that system.
Cool. So we only have two people in a sea of people that are doing something that, without a doubt, it is the most regenerative system on planet Earth regarding chickens, and almost nobody knows about it, okay? So how does it work? That's what we're going to start with. You need, within this system, let me back up and give you a history of it. Everybody heard of Geoff Lawton? If you haven't, you ought to check it out. Geoff spelled Geoff. He first invented this system, okay? But he was inspired by a guy named Carl Hammer at Vermont Composting. If you check out Vermont Composting, they basically produce what they call the best compost on planet Earth, and they use no outside inputs. Or, better yet, they're not using any store-bought feed. Well, Geoff Lawton visited that place and took it from that commercial setting and broke it down into a setting to where you and I can do it. The only problem is that he told people how to do it, but he didn't give a whole lot of information on how to do it with limited resources. That's where we come in. Nobody on this planet has taken this system and has tested it more and shown you videos of how to do it than the two people standing right in front of you today. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that to say that look, I don't call myself an expert at much at all, but I know that I'm an expert when it comes to this system. So any questions you have, we can probably help you out with that. Now, when Geoff Lawton did this system, he did it exclusively with dual-purpose birds, meaning these are birds that can either lay you eggs or you can turn back around and use them as meat, okay? So we are the first people on this planet to take exclusively meat birds, raise them in this system, do it for free, process them, put them in the freezer. Not only did we do that, we hatched birds out, put them in this system, ended up in a freezer. We've taken Australorps, we've taken barred rocks, we've taken every dual-purpose bird you can think of, practically, put them in this system, and we've produced every single time. Now, why would you do this? Okay, so let's say I have 30 birds, and they're very productive birds, and I put them out in the chicken tractor, and let's say you get an egg a day. In this system, we'll find out that the birds will not only produce better quality eggs, but they, in most cases, will produce 10% more. Pretty astonishing, right? Especially for a system where it requires few outside inputs. So, what do you need? Let's talk about the basic components. Okay, keep the laughter to a minimum. My son ought to be writing ransom notes, okay? Can anybody read that says Permapastures Farm up there? Okay, so what we have is a chicken house. And we have this isn't one of the chickens we raised. This is clearly one that's got problems. This is a compost cage. This is a compost pile, compost pile, compost pile. You did good, son. All right. So the way it works is, and we're going to work this kind of backwards. So you need, if it is, and this is stuff we found out, if you have specifically just layers in your system, you need a minimum of about 28 birds. But people like them and a number of others who have done this system have found out that you can do it with considerably less. But I'm going to tell you what the system, the way we've done it. So we got 28 birds in this tractor, if they're exclusively layers. Every day in the bottom of this, now bear with me, it's going to sound a little convoluted, but it's not. This is a compost cage. In the bottom of that compost cage will be the bedding that these guys had inside their tractor. So we put that down first. Following? In an ideal world, if you have ruminants, pigs aren't ruminants, but if you have cows, a lot of people don't. You're working on a homestead, okay? So if you have cows, you're going to take a wheelbarrow of cow manure, stick them in that compost cage. And then every day on top of that poop, you are going to feed them food scraps, okay? Now, you're going to need them on commercial feed for the first couple of weeks. Now, it's like, anybody ever done that keto diet? Okay, so when you get yourself into it, you got a little period where you're not doing so great, right? So the same thing happens with the chickens. They're used to eating store-bought food in however way you did it, but they're making this transition. So the first day they're gonna look at that pile and they're gonna say, tastes great, but less filling. You dig? They're gonna like, oh man, what do I do with this? Hunger's gonna take over. They're gonna start eating that stuff. Okay, after you're a couple of weeks in, as this thing moves along, you're turning, every week, you're turning out the pile. So you got a pile, right? So now the chickens are in this system. You're weaning them off of that store-bought food. As they make that transition, like I said, you're giving them less store-bought food and you're giving them more food scraps. Now, we'll talk about what those food scraps are and where you can get them. If for no other reason you want to listen to what I'm going to say, for that reason of where you can find these food scraps. So what happens? These birds have made this adaptation from being a carb burner to a keto burner. Not really, but that's kind of what they're doing. So they derive from this pile, from all these compost piles. Look at the next compost pile that's alive that you have. You look there with your peripheral vision, and what should you see? Life. You should see little bugs crawling around, but there's a whole lot more that you can't see. That's what these birds are eating. That's where they are deriving their protein, out of this system. They're getting it out of the piles. So in week 1, when they got their first pile out, you're gonna find out, this is the beauty of this system, y'all. I'm a little chicken, I climb on top of that pile, and chickens like to scratch. They're gonna scratch away, peck, peck, peck. They're eating things that you can't see. That is biota. That is the microorganisms. It is the best protein on earth for these birds, and they know better than you how to get it. That's why these chickens in this system produce 10% more. So they're scratching away at that pile, and they're eating the food scraps that I put out here. Like I said, we'll get to that in a minute. Second week, they got another pile, okay? Now they're working both piles. They're gonna show less interest in the first pile, and they're gonna work this one over. At the end of every day when they scratch it out, just take your rake, bring it back in together. Moisture is another issue, but that's another conversation. So you get into your third pile. Now they're deriving their protein out of all piles. At that point, you should take them off of the store-bought food that you were giving them. They're 100% on food scraps and 100% on compost. I mean, on the biota in these compost piles. Sounds a little confusing, I know. So what's happening? Chickens come out every single day. Every single day, I'll feed them on top of this pile, okay? They're getting all of their carbs out of here. They're getting all of their protein out of these piles. Now, every single week, what's gonna happen? Like I said, they will work on this, everybody see that? Can you see that little compost cage? They're getting all their, you feed them there every single day, but once a week, you're gonna turn that pile out. You're gonna flip it. You're gonna add moisture in it. It keeps on indefinitely. It keeps on as long as you want it to, okay? Everybody confused or no? Does it make sense? A little bit?
If anybody has questions, just kind of raise your hand up and we can get to it as we need to.
We'll get to that in a minute, though. We'll get to the questions in a minute. So, within this system, and if you doubt me, go look at our YouTube channel because it's out there for everybody to see. We've adapted this system. So we're saying if this will produce 1 cubic yard, can we produce more? We were at a time producing 1.5 cubic yards. Then we kicked it on up to 2 cubic yards. And it works. The more you add to it, up to 3 cubic yards, the better the system works. Now, it works well in the winter. And we're talking North Carolina winters. Works well in the summer. The only thing you need to make sure of is that the piles have at least some measure of moisture in there. Look, this isn't a panacea. You're not going to learn overnight how to do this. I had to invent a lot of the technology we now know of this, okay? When I was learning this, there was minimal understanding on how to do this. So I was running 3 different chicken tractors on steroids at the same time trying to figure it out. For example, what if I don't have cows, okay? A lot of these questions can be answered on our YouTube channel. So if you don't have cows, what do? Because I said you take their bedding out, stick it in the bottom, cover it up with poop. It can be pig poop, believe it or not. It can be pig poop, lamb poop, hippopotamus poop, you name it. It doesn't matter. Dog, no, that's, almost said yeah, but no, not dog poop. You want to, I'm sorry, rabbit? Rabbit poop's good to use. Goat, yeah. Cudamonde, anything, but not dogs, okay, not cats. If you got cats, they'll get in there, but it's negligible. It's not going to be a big deal. So what's happening? Every week you're turning out a pile. That's week 1, week 2, week 3. In 4 weeks, you will produce the best compost for your area on the planet. And why do I say that? How can I possibly say that? Because the microbes that you produce in this system, remember, we're not just farming soil, we're not just grass farmers, we're microbe farmers. That's really the way you ought to be looking at this stuff. Because the microbes in that pile, let's say it's not even perfect, it is more perfectly adapted to your property. Because when you dig a compost pile, let's say I get one from John here on this farm. I live 6 hours away. It's like taking an Eskimo and dropping him off in the equator. Ain't gonna do too good, right? Or take the compost that's indigenous to my place, the microorganisms, take them out here. It's not gonna do as good. It may look rich, it may look lush, it may be wonderful in every way you can imagine, but at the end of the day, the compost you produce on your property is the best compost in the world. Dead serious. I'll say it again. The compost you produce on your property is better than anything you can hope to buy. I mean, within a couple of miles of your place, you could probably get some good stuff. But outside of that, you are not getting microbes that are indigenous to your property. So after 4 weeks, initially in this system, I'm putting out, imagine this thing tractoring through the landscape, okay? So every week after that, it can even be adapted for every 2 weeks. Every week after that, you're putting out at least a cubic yard of dynamite compost that you can't buy. How cool is that? And you're doing it all for free. So if I'm using exclusively layers, what did I tell you the magic number was? Now what do you think it is if I'm using meat birds? Let's say big red broilers. The number actually goes down. And here's why. The ideal bird in a system like this is the polar opposite of everything, just like everything else you've been told. Me and John had long conversations over the last couple of days about how nearly everything you think you know is a lie, right? What you've been told about the perfect bird, what you've been told about the perfect cow, that's another discussion. What you've been told about the perfect pig is the polar opposite of what they tell you. The perfect bird in this system is a good, heavy-bodied bird that forages very well. My favorite go-to, barred Plymouth Rock. Australorps. You always want an Australorp in your flock anyway because they look like crows, so birds of prey are less likely to attack your birds. It makes a big difference. It really does. Rhode Island Reds. They work great in this system. But if I had to pick one bird, but remember, we're permaculture designers. We don't just take anything in a vacuum. So we have multiple different types of birds within this system. So within this system, meat birds, 21, magic number. Because they're bigger birds. They move more stuff. They need more food, right? So 28, if exclusively layers, if that's what you currently have, dual purpose, you can use that many if they're dual purpose. 24 with dual purpose and 21, you could even back it off to 17 with good birds, good big body birds that forage well and will get in there and move soil around, okay? So
that meat birds, how big is the chicken house?
okay, his question is, because I know everybody can't hear it, his question is, how big is the chicken house? Well, the golden rule is 1 square foot per bird. So if I have 28 birds, I need 28 square feet, right? Wrong. Because that's remember I told you everything you've been told is wrong? Yeah, so they tell you the golden rule is 1 square foot per bird. In a 4x6 tractor, I should only get how many birds? 24 birds, right? 24 square feet. I can actually get about 35 in there. So you got to play with these numbers. Everything they tell you, now there's certain people will tell you don't feed comfrey, don't do this, don't do that. Look, y'all, I'm finding out after having done this for years and years, along with him, he's been specifically trained by some of the best on the planet. And we are finding out that everything we think we know is a lie. So you want to push those limits. So, I answer your question? Anybody? Okay, before we get in, let me just pull this off real quick before we get into this system even more. We lived in a small town, and we still own that property in DeKalb, Texas. It's claim to fame, home of Dan Blocker, Hoss Cartwright, right? Nobody in that town. But I got people telling me, I can't do this. I don't have access to this. I don't have access to that. So how are we able to do it in a small town like that? Who thinks they don't have access to food? Okay, yeah, I kind of set you up for not raising your hand on that one. So if you live near a city, you probably got a Chipotle around, right? Talk to the general manager. They will work with you. You might have a Panera Bread. Not perfect, but it's still food. And in these times when gas is over $5 a gallon in some places, maybe you're not so concerned about it being non-GMO. Who knows? It may be what you need. But I'm going to tell you, the golden colleges, universities. I got to deal with the University of North Carolina begging me to come get, because all these highfalutin kids these days go to school and they don't want to eat, Chef Boyardee. They got to have organic. 600 pounds a day. They're willing to give it for me. Better yet, they're still willing. They're going to sift it for me. Put the pasta over here, vegetables here, bread over here. 600 pounds a day. Okay, so you're saying I don't live near any of those, but I'll tell you what you do have around. Schools. Name a town that doesn't have a junior high, a middle school, elementary school, high school. What do they have there? If you don't know about this book, you need to think about it, especially in these times. It's called The Independent Farmstead by Shawn and Beth Doherty. I thought I invented this years ago. Come to find out, these people were light years ahead of me, okay? Get that book. You'll be glad you did, because you find out that in their system, it all surrounds itself around the family milk cow. So you get the milk you got. Your omnivores, your pigs and chickens can eat that food, right? All the stuff you don't eat. And then you grow other things, either grow it or you acquire it. Let's say it's within a school system. So what do they have in all these junior high schools? What do they have in the elementary school? What do they give them every day that you could drink? Do you have any idea? Check, you doubt me. Go look at every school dumpster you can think of and count the number of milk jugs you see in there. Don't tell me it doesn't happen. I know, I've done it. I've seen it. They fill up in a single day in DeKalb, Texas, which is where we started all this, a quarter of that dumpster a day full of the milk that they are not allowed to reuse. Now, is that perfect milk? I wouldn't drink it, but my chickens and pigs would, okay? Now I'm saying this isn't ideal, so anybody that tells me I can't do this chicken tractor on steroids where I live, you need to expand your thinking, because I guarantee there's a junior high, there's an elementary, there's a high school where they're throwing foods away in extraordinary amounts. In fact, one trip per week to Chipotle is enough to feed 6 adult pigs and 30 chickens for a week. So you may not live next to a Chipotle, but you live next to a school, I guarantee it. There's somebody around you. If I could do it, and he could do it in DeKalb, Texas, home of Hoss Cartwright, it can be done anywhere in the United States of amnesia. It can be done. We've just got to be thinking outside the box. You have to be thinking far outside the box, y'all. As far as your carbon sources, we've covered all that on the YouTube channel.
Well, that was a pretty flaming start to the presentation now, wasn't it? Thank you to Rebecca for giving me a 30-second warning so that I did not echo the heck out of things. One of the things about being the organizer of the Self-Reliance Festival is I don't always see all of the presentations because people sometimes interrupt me and ask questions, and particularly back then when we did, I think this was the first presentation that Billy and William ever did at a Self-Reliance Festival. And that was before I had awesome staff members helping me. I think that was the event where I met Rebecca, who is part of who made this webinar possible. And Shawn was an avid attendee, but he was not helping with organization on the back end. I would get asked roughly 400,000 questions a day. And I saw half of this presentation. So one of the things I love about this webinar series is I get to see and concentrate on without interruption the presentation. And I'm always struck with what a great speaker Billy Bond is. He's such a good teacher, and he made it his mission in life. I remember I was sitting with him one day in the evening after we had done a class, and he said, what do you think is going to happen in the future in the world, Nicole? And I said, well, it's looking a little tense. He's like, I think people are going to be hungry. And if you look at everything that Billy does, it's centered around feeding yourself without breaking the bank. Ways to optimize small scale food production systems on your home in a way that's environmentally sustainable, but also can feed you and often will be so productive that it feeds other people. Because what we know is hungry people are more likely to misbehave than fed people. And so the more people we can keep fed, the better off we all are in the long run. So, you know, a lot of people think about homesteading and being prepared or preppers as two different things, but they're just two sides of the same coin, because once you go down one path, you end up on the other path. I came to this world from the homesteading side and then realized I was a prepper. Other people start on the prepping side and they start realizing, gosh, like if something happens and I can't get the things I need, I guess I should store the things I need. And they start accumulating things, and then they realize eventually that will run out too. And if I don't learn how to do things and I don't, you know, figure out how to produce, then that's a finite amount of time as well. And so they end up then getting interested in homesteading things. So that's actually one of the things I love about the Self-Reliance Festival is we're talking to both sides of the same coin. And another thing I like is is the business side, because it's very easy to spend all of your money and go into all the debt and stack up all of your fuel storage and your generator and your solar panels and your food stores and your medical item stores and a couple of really fun pew-pews to use for self-defense and maybe some night vision stuff and some body armor and all of those things, and then look around, realize you're still in a job you hate that you have to go to every day, and you are stuck with that because you've managed to accumulate a lot of debt, and you're starting to analyze your month in terms of how much debt you have to support, rather than with sort of more of that longer term vision of like how you can build the life that you want to have. And the big thing that happens, and I think probably the most important thing that happens when we get together in Camden, Tennessee, is a couple of things. You have access to people who have built themselves from absolutely rock bottom nothing, right? And it is that place where they start, and within just a couple years have become so successful they're millionaires. You hear these stories, you hear what they faced, you hear how they sacrificed. Because everybody I know who's done that had some very, very long days. They did things like sleep where they worked. They did things like take showers at the local pool or at a YMCA or something because they didn't have an apartment to live in, and cook on a hot pot. They did all sorts of stuff like that. They worked day and night to put things back together after their lives had fallen apart. And the lessons they learned during that time and the discipline they learned to have is a lot of how they became prosperous. And everybody I know who's built themselves up this way is very motivated to help anybody else who's like, how do I get out of the rat race? How do I get out of the rat race? They'll tell you how. But they're also very cognizant about their time. So they'll say, you know, well, what you need to do, person starting your off-grid homestead, is document it in video and start posting consistently once a week and develop a following, because that following is part of who you can sell to when you have something that you've figured out is the thing you want to sell, right? So that's great, and that's very generic, but then I meet real people at Self-Reliance Festival who have real problems and are really uncomfortable with the way the world is, looking perhaps for a new place to live. One person that comes to mind that I already had met her digitally because I interviewed her on my podcast was Dawn Sutton, who runs our information booth and does a whole bunch of the event management for Self-Reliance Festival now. She came down to Self-Reliance Festival, the second one I believe it was her first one, because she had seen us all on the internet, and despite being kind of introverted, decided she wanted to come out and and check this out and get to know who these people were, see if these people really were who they were. And her husband came as well. And what happened after she was there is she and her husband decided where they wanted to be was Tennessee, and they were in another state. They were, in fact, the owners of the sheep that Tactical bought that are now running at the Holler Homestead, because they realized when they were in Camden that every barrier they thought was in their head for keeping them from moving somewhere different was just in their head. And that if they really wanted to move to Tennessee, they could make it happen. And her husband got a job that he could do from home at a Tennessee company, though. And she figured out that they could sell the house. They had saved enough money that they could buy their land outright in Tennessee and then start building an off-grid home. And so when I say an example of somebody making videos about off-grid home building, that's who I was thinking of, actually. And she makes some good videos. And he has the knowledge to build a solar system because of his area of expertise. So they've put together those things, and they decided, I don't need, I don't know how big their house was, but let's just say it was 2,000 square feet. I don't need a 2,000 square foot home with a couple of acres in this part of the world, which I'm seeing prices go up. I'm seeing an increase in violence around us, that sort of thing. What we can do is buy a shed to house, like a tiny house, and build it out and live in a camper while that's happening. And on hot days in the summer in Tennessee, when we don't have electricity yet, it's hot. It's hot. No air conditioning. And we're going to work our butts off getting this place built so we can get it done. And within a year, they had moved. And from there, they've put it in a solar system. They have different tiny homes that they're building for their kids. They've become the local karaoke machine in the area. So they run karaoke at different bars around the area. And always happy to see them at Self-Reliance Festival. But they changed their whole life just because they happened to go to this event and some barriers that were in their way towards what they wanted went away. And we've seen that happen time and again. And it's not just somebody moves to an off-grid home, right? Some people decide to start a business and they build the business and they come back and, they're a multi-million-dollar business that didn't exist 2 years ago. That energy is a great thing to expose yourself, even if you don't want to start a business, you just want to do a side hustle, or you don't want to do any of it. That energy and people who are in that space will ask you questions that make you think. And when that happens, it's an amazing transformation that we go to. Okay, this is about where the live stream is going to end on YouTube, guys. So don't forget, if you want to see the second half of the programming, go to selfreliancefestival.com/webinar and sign up, and you'll have an automated email with the link to the Zoom. I hope to see you on the Zoom. I have been seeing attendee counts going up, so hopefully y'all got the memo. And Facebook, same thing. So that's the deal. I did want to announce that while we were watching that video, digital passes to Self-Reliance Festival launched. We have, with the help of Rebecca from Red Flyer Media, been able to provide digital passes where you see all of the presentations from the stage, unless one of the speakers says they don't want their presentation recorded. But so far, nobody's ever told me not to record their session, so we've been in the clear. But we do ask them, we do give them that out. So you'll see those presentations live, and then within about a month or so after the festival, we have them edited down into individual videos that you can log in and see. And those digital passes are now live on the ticket page, also at $50. So now is a really good time to grab those tickets. That's selfreliancefestival.com, and just click on tickets in the upper right-hand corner. And with that, Shawn, it's your turn to talk. I think you have a couple of questions for us, right?
Yeah. So, well, my first question is for you, Nicole. Do we have the ability to put a poll up for everyone? Okay, great. So there's going to be a poll. You guys